Let's talk immigration.
Yes.
You've been in Congress just a little bit.
7 years, seven and a half.
I wanted to kind of start with the Utah Compact, which
Sure.
I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And one of the bullets of the Utah Compact is it says federal solutions. Immigration is a federal policy issue between the U.S. government and other countries, not Utah and other countries. We urge Utah's congressional delegation and others to lead efforts to strengthen federal laws and protect our national borders. We urge state leaders to adopt reasonable policies addressing immigrants in Utah. Given that it is outlined as a federal issue, is this ever going to get fixed?
Well, it needs to, but I worry that it won't. The reality of it is that we can make, first downs, we can score a few points, but are we ever going to really get across the finish line and finish it? I doubt it, but certainly we can make progress and make improvements, and we should.
And from your point, being here for as long as you have, what is the holdup? Why can't this get across the finish line?
I've seen small things that we couldn't get across, and so people say we'll do it in one big bill, and I've seen large, big bills that couldn't get across. And at the end of the day, it's just been really frustrating trying to find that right window and that right time when we can get something across the finish line. And of late, because of the frustrations with the border, I found my colleagues not even willing to talk about any solutions until they fix the border.
Is that on both sides, Republican and Democrat?
Well, I think it's primarily the Republicans. I think as the border became worse and worse, Democrats too realized it was a problem, but for a long time they weren't willing to talk about it being a problem.
Yeah. So you feel like until that has been fully resolved, the appetite for bigger reform
I have
is not
no
there?
doubt until that's resolved, the appetite is not there. Not even for bigger reform, even small things. We had a bill, and it was for highly skilled visa workers and to move the caps. And it had as many as 200 co-sponsors before. Jason Chaffetz, my predecessor, actually sponsored it. And it was a very popular bill. We just couldn't get it across the finish line. And my last year in Congress, we tried again, and it was attacked viciously by the same people who had actually co-sponsored it before. And the answer I got was, we're not doing anything until we fix the border.
I mean, ultimately, this is Congress's responsibility. Are you frustrated seeing Congress essentially abdicating one of its major responsibilities?
I can't tell you that I'm more frustrated about anything as much as that, although debt might be there, right there with it. But it's incredibly frustrating. It's one of the biggest disappointments of my time here.
And did you have hope when you got here? Were you a little naive that this could be fixed and you've sort of wisened up? Or
well, let me just say I haven't.
Having been here
let me just say I haven't given up all hope, but it is frustrating. And I have a number of bills, some that are my original ideas and some that I've taken from others that I'm sponsoring. And we're just really unable to get any movement on any of them.
Mm-hmm. Just generally
Just generally the tone. And here again, I'll come back to right now, the mood is, it's all about the border. Until the border is fixed, we're not even going to have this conversation.
Now, the border has improved.
I think we're close. Yeah, I think we're close to people feeling like, okay, yeah, I said I couldn't talk until then. I think that they want a little bit more time, but I don't think it's going to take long before people feel like that pressure is off the border.
Mm-hmm. Have you been satisfied with what the Trump administration has done on immigration since coming into office?
Yes, there's more to do. I think part of the frustration there too is, and I try to separate the two issues, the border and immigration. And in many ways, Congress has passed the law that we need for the border. The administration has not enforced those. Now, that's not true when it comes to over broader immigration issues, but it is on the border. And it was really frustrating to me to watch us go from President Trump's first presidency to President Biden's, and now back to President Trump, and see no difference in law, but just simply in how the administration enforced it, making it a dramatic difference. And even President Biden, towards the end of his term, finally ratcheted up some of the enforcement and made a dramatic difference, all with existing law.
Do you feel like then, when you say there's a difference between the border and immigration, I mean, stopping crossings, illegal crossings versus fixing the system?
Yeah, the way I look at that is it's already against the law to come across the border without the proper documentation. That's not a law Congress needs to pass. We have all sorts of broken parts of immigration once people, they're either applying or coming into our country, that is very broken, and that's where Congress needs to do its job.
Mm-hmm. You have some bills that you'd like to see get across. Can you just give me a little laundry list of things that, if John Curtis were king for a day, which I know you've used that phrase, I start using that more.
I should be king for a day, right?
If you were king for a day, what are the things that you feel like are needed to reform our broken system?
Yeah, so if I could just go super big and then kind of break it down into pieces, we need a workers' visa program. Years ago, people would come into this country, work, and go back home. And we made it very conducive to people doing that. And in many cases, they didn't want to stay, they wanted to go back home, and we made it so difficult for that to happen. Just simply a program that's as simple as you want to come here to work, you're going to obey our laws, you'll pay our taxes, and you want to go home in 3 months or when the end of the season's over. We need to make that happen. Now, I have a couple specific bills, one that I like a lot. It's called the State-Sponsored Visa Bill. And it actually gives states a chunk of visas that they're responsible for. It gives the governor the ability to use those visas any way he or she wants. They can customize it based upon their state. It also puts the responsibility on the state to follow those visa holders, and at the end of the year, come back and tell us where they are and validate that they've kept the laws and they've paid taxes. And if the governors can do that, we give them more visas. And it starts as a pilot program and then it grows. The great thing about this is a lot of my Republican colleagues who don't want more visas, the reason they don't want them is because we're not doing a good job of tracking them. States are willing to track them and spend the time and effort to do that. And so I think it's a tremendous win. And then it also lets states customize how they use those visas because each states are so different. They can also work together and share visas. For instance, you could work at the ski resorts in Utah in the winter and then go someplace else in the summer and work with the state to share those. And I think if we could do that, it would be just a significant change to give states that responsibility and that opportunity. And by the way, when we introduced the bill originally, Governor Herbert was governor. He came out to D.C. to endorse the bill. Utah likes the idea. I think it'd be a fantastic idea.
It's just still sitting there, though.
It is still sitting there, yes.
Get some movement on it.
Yeah. I've got other bills. I mentioned it was called the EAGLE Act, and it's a bill for, right now we have caps on countries on how many people can come into our country on a highly skilled visa. Some of the countries don't use any of their quota. Some of them, India, it would literally take 20 or 30 years for somebody to get their green card and come here. So it keeps the visas the same, but just takes the caps off, and so that those visas can flow between countries. That's the one that's been out there forever, and we just can't get it across the finish line. But it would be a very good bill, and most people agree that it would be a good bill.
Yeah. Any other solutions you'd like to see? I mean, in a perfect world.
Well, here again, you can go all the way to a full immigration reform. There's a bill out there called the Dignity Act. Representative Salvador from Florida put that forward, and I joined her on it. It's not perfect, and here's the thing people realize. There is no bill that's going to be perfect and will have some flaws. The other thing that's very problematic is if you stick your neck out and let's say you put your name on that bill or any other bill, knowing that it's not perfect, but that it'll go through a process, through committee, between the House and the Senate before it actually gets perfection. But right now, there's huge criticism. Anytime you put your name on a bill, people will find something wrong with it, and I'm telling you, they come and they want to whack your head off. Because they'll find something in the bill they don't like.
It just poisons the water.
And it poisons the waters, and then people are afraid to jump on bills. And the reality of it is our legislative process is messy, right? Like you have a bill, it's very imperfect, you toss it out there, you get feedback on it, you take it through committee, it has amendments, it goes through change, gets to the floor, it can have additional amendments, then maybe you go back and forth between the House and the Senate. That's how you get a bill to near perfection. And so when you criticize a bill just out of the gates, you get people afraid to hop on it. It never does have a chance to go through that process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you need to reposition, or you?
No,
okay.
I just saw you around here and there.
I dropped my phone somewhere.
Uh-oh.
Oh, here it is. And I had a note. It's interesting, I think, when we talk about Utah has always been looked at, I think, as a compassionate state.
Sure.
Toward immigration and immigrants. President Trump's administration changed the policy and allows now ICE agents to go into places like churches and hospitals. And that happened the day after he was sworn in. Do you think that was the right move to change that policy?
So I think one of the things we can all agree on is when we have people here undocumented and they have additional crimes, especially violent crimes, like I don't really see that they need a sanctuary anywhere, right? Like we ought to be able to remove them from our country. Now there's quite a debate when you go like at what point and how hard are we going after everybody that's here that's undocumented? And I think we can have that debate, but let's agree that these violent criminals that have committed additional crimes, we want them out of here. There's no reason they should be in the United States.
But is that a chilling effect on those who are here not committing crimes and afraid that they're going to get targeted at church or in the hospital?
Yeah, I think that's something that we should discuss, but the reality of it is if you're here undocumented, let's get this fixed. Like that chilling effect, let's use that to come out from behind the shadows. Let's figure out how to get those people here, either legally, whether they go back home under their own accord, or we change our laws here so there is a way for them to get legal. That's called a path. I know just the word the path is very, very controversial, but I think one of the ways to look at this is every other crime in our society, we prescribe how you get right with the law. So if you get a speeding ticket, you pay a fine. If you rob a bank, you go to jail. We prescribe that. This is one really unique area where somebody has committed an offense and we refuse to describe the remedy because it's called the path. And I think that's wrong. I think we should come out and say, look, whatever it is, hard or easy, this is how you get right with the law if you're here and you're undocumented. And the fact that we haven't freezes these people and makes it impossible for them to move forward. It's not good for them. It's not good for our society because they have to stay in the shadows. And I would really like to see us fix that.
So you're not opposed to him having changed that policy?
Well, you're saying going after people.
And hospitals.
Yeah. So, like, I don't think you get a sanctuary if you're here and you've committed violent crimes or serious crimes. No criminal gets a sanctuary, right? And so why do they?
Yeah, the reason I asked, too, is because there was a recent poll from the D-News and the Hinckley Institute of Politics and found Utahns largely opposed allowing ICE agents to go into those areas. They're supportive of deporting criminals by a large margin. They're supportive of deporting undocumented immigrants, but when it comes to the hospitals and churches, they feel like maybe that's an area that is a little...
Listen, every law needs some common sense with it. But if you simply tell all the people who are violent criminals, if you go hide in churches and hospitals, we're not coming after you, I don't think that's a good approach. Now, certainly you need some common sense when you're applying that law and when you're dealing with it. And I think all of us are kind of waiting for that one video that comes out, right, that shows a 6-year-old, and we've seen it before with assault rifles and things, taking them even out of their home, whether it's a church or not. And so I think it's not so much where, it's how you enforce the law.
Mm-hmm. What about division of families? That's another part of the Utah Compact. And I know faith groups have talked about, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not dividing families. Birthright citizenship, the push to end that, there's concern that would divide families. What do you think about that?
Well, I remember the first President Trump term, very few things caught as much attention as the separation of children from families. And I learned very quickly that Utah does care deeply about that and keeping families together. So once again, we do need some common sense. Now, how do we handle, just because somebody's a violent criminal and they have children doesn't mean we're not going to go after them. And I think here again, you're just using common sense in how we go after that. But I agree with that sentiment that we don't separate families. At the same time, we've got this thing called chain migration, which means if you're trying to get into the United States and you're somebody who we want here in the United States, there's a good chance you're not getting in because a sister of somebody who came over here, became a citizen, puts them ahead of you. And I think that's a conversation worth having, right? No, we don't want to break up families, but if that's the only way you can get in the United States, then that's problematic as well.
Is the push to end birthright citizenship, in your mind, the right one?
Well, I think we're going to let the courts decide that. I think it's not likely. I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, it's not likely that passes the test. So we'll see, where the courts weigh in on that one.
Do you have an opinion, though, on the fact that they're pushing that?
I think it's a question. I think no question should be off the table, right? Like, you know, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I don't think we should ever take any question off the table. And if it's the right thing to do, we shouldn't be afraid of questioning it.
But in your mind, this is not going to pass constitutional.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't sound like it's not a case I would take.
That you would do if you were a lawyer, yeah. I'm trying to think of other things that I wanted to ask about with immigration, because I think, again, going back to the compassion issue, I think Utah's sometimes looked at very differently. Do you think that Utah has a role to play in eventually fixing this in a way that is both, I guess, just and merciful? I don't know what other terms to use, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's a false narrative to say that you have to sacrifice compassion to enforce the law. And let me give you a good example. At the border, we're not compassionate when we let the cartels take somebody's money to get them into the United States and then keep them hostage to the cartel because now you can't work without the cartel. That's not compassion. That's where the rule of law needs to step in and say, no, that's not compassion. And I don't like the fact that people say, oh, you got to choose between compassion and the rule of law. I don't think they're separated. I think Utahns also, as much as we care about compassion, we also care about the rule of law. And we need to demand both from this system. We can be compassionate and we can enforce the rule of law.
And you feel like your proposals that admittedly aren't moving kind of straddle those
Absolutely, yeah,
lines?
that's what I would hope to do, is say, for sure.
I'm not in your shoes, but go back to the frustration. You have this proposal, you've been here, probably have a lot of people off the record saying, hey, great idea, John, but you can't get it moving. I mean,
And
at what point do you lose hope in the system?
I never lose
yourself.
So I never lose hope. I'm a pretty optimistic guy, and I've seen things here. There's so many things that shift and change that open up windows. And I think, you know, if you watch for windows that open up and you're ready, and that's the point to having the legislation, having run the traps on it, having tried it before, knowing what adjustments you need to make. That would be my goal. And then a window will open up and we'll be ready. We have our legislation. But I would say that's not the only frustration. The other frustration is what comes from those back home when you try to get behind something knowing, yep, it's not perfect, but then somebody's just ready there to knock your head off because they'll find a flaw in your bill. Well, of course, every bills have flaws when they start out. And I do think that both are important, is we need to be working as hard as we can to fix this, and we need the support of those back home to be patient a little bit while we put things out there, while we put ideas out there, while we put trial balloons out there, while we try different policies and let that go through the process to see if we can get a product that will come out at the end.
Of course, the public has been waiting for decades for something to happen here on this.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Patience might run a little thin.
Well, I would say as a guy who's had his head whacked off, I'm not sure all of them are waiting for that. I think some of them are as guilty as Congress is in not wanting a solution and not finding a solution.
Just the public?
Not to paint all the public. Yeah. I'm just saying that there are those out there that I'm not convinced want this fixed either.
What do you think it'll take to change this, to actually cause something to go forward?
So in a perfect world, we would have leadership from the top. We'd have a president who came in with an agenda to fix this. Lacking that, Congress would do their job and would step up and do that. And then you'd have a supportive public behind them. It can still happen without all of those factors coming together. And I think you know from some of your questions that for me this is very important to keep trying, to keep putting things out there, seeing what I can get momentum behind. Sometimes I'll put small ideas out there and see if we can get a little momentum behind a small idea. And sometimes we're putting bigger ideas out there to see if we can get momentum behind a big idea. And I can just tell you and your listeners, I'll keep poking and prodding. This is very important for me personally, for the state, to make progress, even if we're not totally solving it, at least to make progress.
You have a bigger voice in Washington now than you did. People listen to you more now as a senator than one of 435 members of Congress. Do you feel like you can, as you move into this, I know you're still, I guess, a freshman senator.
We're sitting here in my temporary office.
We're in the basement.
We're in the basement, yeah.
Based on your seniority.
Yeah.
But as you gain seniority, and you have a larger voice now than you did. Are you optimistic you can make a difference in this realm?
Optimistic or not, I'm going to try. Right, I owe it to Utahns to try, and I do think we can make progress. The question is how fast and how much.
You mind if I look and just make sure
Nope.
I don't have anything else I want to ask?
That's great.
Since we don't come out to DC every day.
Your op-ed.
Oh yeah, so
Go ahead.
several months ago, we put an op-ed in the Des News you could refer to, and it really talks about the false choice between compassion and rule of law. And I'd just double down on that we should demand both.
Yeah.
We can do this with the rule of law, and we can do it compassionately.
No, we'll link to that. There was one, my producer had a question, and I've asked this, but I'll just say, is there a way to balance immigration policy with acknowledging the reality that immigrants are integrated into communities across Utah, and we have a history in our state of inclusion and, welcoming those from outside?
For sure. And this is the compassion part of it. And I'll come back to this point of we haven't given those people a way to get right with the law. And we need to. We have people in the state that have been there for many years, have obeyed the law, have paid their taxes, are good people. And now they're intertwined into our community with children. And we're not realistic if we don't come up with a way for them to get square with the law in a fair way. And immigration is kind of the one category where, as I mentioned before, we haven't defined how they get square with the law. And then somehow we want a disproportionate penalty for them. And I think we need to step back and say, look, the crime and the punishment need to fit. You can't put this huge punishment on a crime that doesn't justify that. And our inability to put anything out there, first of all, and then to demand something that's not in balance with what they have done is one of the reasons that these people stand out there and live in this really uncomfortable place for them and for us too. And I think one of the best things we could do is figure out how we square that.
I was also wanted to ask, what would you say to those that are fearful? Because I'm sure you've seen reports like I have of people going through the legal process that are getting pulled aside at airports and being detained, or are in issues where all of a sudden they're fearful that they're trying to do what's right according to our laws, and they're getting targeted because they look different.
Yeah, so I don't know about that specifically, but I can tell you we need to come up with something that makes them comfortable in getting square with the law. And our inability to do that is just as problematic as our inability to fix what's happening at the border or to fix all these other gnarly issues with immigration. And I'll come back to the fact there's no area of the law that I know of where we haven't put the remedy out there for somebody to get square with the law.
But I imagine you don't want people who are in the system legally to get pulled aside, unjustly.
Oh, you're saying people that are in the system legally?
That are going through the legal process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we need to tell them what the process is, make them feel safe with that process, and then let's get them to go through it.
Yeah. And then I think you talked about this on Meet the Press, President Trump sending people to El Salvador and in defiance perhaps of a court order. What do you think about it? Is the Trump administration going about its immigration policies in the right way, in a constitutional way?
So, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have the details about that particular. There's quite a bit out there about when the order came down, and I don't really know the particulars of that. But I can tell you a couple things. The president has said he will obey court orders, and so great. Let's make sure he does. And
some of his staffers have not said that.
Well, he's the president of the United States.
They've said the opposite.
Yeah, well, he's the president of the United States. He's the boss, and it stays with him. At the end of the day, he's responsible for what he does and what his staffers do. But I'd also say the president did campaign on exactly what he's doing. As a matter of fact, he campaigned on actually being tougher than what he's doing, because he campaigned on taking on everybody that's here that's undocumented, and right now he's really just targeting those who've committed additional crimes. So he's doing what he said he would do. He said he'll do it within the law, and let's see how this plays out. I think, quite frankly, the easy part is dealing with those who are here and have committed additional, particularly serious crimes. That's where the consensus is, and then it gets more difficult after that.
Anything else you want to say? I recognize this is a complex issue. I recognize you're one of many. And I recognize all those things. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would add, I'm as frustrated as Utahns are that I haven't been able to make a difference in this. And we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying new bills. I've been comfortable in signing onto bills that I've taken some heat for back home, because I feel like we do have to get momentum behind something and then let that go through the legislative process. And my main message is I'll keep trying.
Okay. Anything you want to say about Provo, since we usually end our interviews on that note?
Yeah. You ready for some Rockwell ice cream?
Yeah.
Problem is, if you're doing the intermittent fast in the morning and I'm doing it in the afternoon, we got to find just those little minutes that cross where we can go get some ice cream.
Yeah.